Hi, everyone. You've probably figured out that I'm not here today. I'm very sick. So I just want to show you something really quick that might help you remember how to get your values on your unit circle a little bit easier than straight up just memorizing. Um, Now, one thing to remember is that if you want to find an angle that's not in the first quadrant, what you're going to do is find a reference angle. So if you've got, like, here's your XY axis, here's your XY. Let's say you've got an angle down here, right? Its stated position. Then this angle, theta prime, is going to be your reference angle, even though your regular theta is this. So in this particular case, because you're in the third quadrant, you're going to do theta minus pi, or theta minus 180 degrees, depending on what angle you're dealing with. If you're dealing with degrees, obviously, you're going to want to work with degrees, and likewise with radians. But once you find what your reference angle is, you still need to know your unit circle in your first quadrant, which is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. It's not too bad, but it's not like drop dead easy. Otherwise, everyone would do it. So if you want to know your first, you've got, like, here's pi over 6, here's pi over 3, and here's pi over 4, here's pi over 3. Something like that. If you want to know those, there's a trick for sine, at the very least, not really for cosine, but just remember that sine and cosine are related. So if sine is one value, then cosine is the other guy. Usually when sine is 1/2, cosine is root 3 over 2. The only difference being pi over 4 or 45 degrees, where they're both the same thing. But the trick is dead easy. Genuinely, it really is. You've got to remember the order of your angles. That part's the tricky part. I really think that part's the hard part. It's 0, and then pi over 6, and then pi over 4, and then pi over 3, and then pi over 2, right? That's your whole first quadrant, including the axes 0 and pi over 2. So if you want to know the sign of any of these values, it goes in order. All you have to do is plug in, starting from 0, plug in a value in the square root over 2. So what I mean by that is, if you're starting out with the sine, let me make that bigger so you can see it. If we're starting with the sine of 0, well, that'll be the square root of 0 over 2. And the square root of 0 is 0, and 0 cut in half is 0. Now, it doesn't just continue on, and you don't just plug in, like, pi over 6 now. You increase in sequential order. This was the first one, so you plug in 0. For the second angle, pi over 6, you plug in 1, because you're just going to count up from 0. You're going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're always going to plug it in to this guy over here, to the square root of x over 2. That x is just going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on which angle you're plugging it in on. So your first angle is angle 0. Your second angle is angle pi over 6. 3 is pi over 4. 4 is pi over 3. Or wait. Hold on. I don't think I can count. So we'll see in a second. Oh, yeah. No, I could count. Hold on. Sorry, I actually had to double check whether or not I counted great. That's fantastic. Okay, so your next guy, for example, sine of pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. And you don't have to change this one, because it's just the square root of 2 over 2. I'm going to keep going here. Your next guy is the sine of pi over 3, which is the square root of 3 over 2. Same idea, right? It's just plugging in whatever that number is. The last guy would be sine of pi over 2 is the square root of 4 over 2, which is 2 over 2, which is 1. Now, you can go ahead and memorize all these values too. It doesn't matter to me. Oh, I'm sorry. This would be 1/2. I never clarified that. You can memorize these values. That's what I did. And that's fine. But it might help to have a pattern to follow while you're doing it. You're just plugging in, starting at 0, stuff into the square root of x over 2. That's really all you're doing here. Now, you might be wondering, okay, that's sine, but how do I do cosine? Well, when sine is 0, this one you kind of do have to remember, Cosine of 0 is also 1, and that's going to change depending on what quadrant you're in. So if we're on the x-axis over by pi, right? If we're over here, that's going to be -1 for cosine because you're to the left of the y-axis. But then over here you've got cosine of pi over 6. Well, if sine is 1/2, cosine is going to be √3/2. If sine is √2/2, cosine is going to be the same thing. It's going to be √2/2. Sine of pi over 3 is √3/2. Well, cosine of pi over 3 is going to be 1/2 then. That's all we're doing. When sine is 1, cosine is going to be 0. And the reason for that one is because if sine is 1, you're up here, which means you're on the y-axis, which means you are not away from the y-axis, go figure. But that's how we determine what your x-coordinate is your distance, is your horizontal distance away from the x-coordinate. So if you're not away from, your y-axis, your x-coordinate is how far away you are from the y-axis. And if you're on the y-axis, you're not away from the y-axis, which means that your x-coordinate is 0. That's just a quick trick that you can use. You don't have to use it. That's fine. If you wanted to. It should help with your unit circle if you were like, oh, God, I can't remember all these values. It's okay. It's a lot to remember, absolutely. But remember, at the end of the day, you're really just looking for your reference angles, and then you come back to the first quadrant. And also, always be careful about the SIGN sign of your coordinates. So here you've got like x comma y, and over here you've got -x comma y. Here you've got -x comma -y, and then here you've got x comma -y. Or another way you can remember it, when you're talking specifically about trig functions, you have all students take calculus, and all meaning all trig functions are positive. Students standing in for S means that sine is positive. T take as in tangent, meaning tangent is positive, and that's because tangent is just the y coordinate divided by the x coordinate. And then calculus being cosine being the x coordinate here. So, or being positive as well. Sorry. That's all I got. Work on your homework. Email me with questions. I'm going to start 4.4 hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be back. Yeah, if you got questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a good day.